Hello, I'm Sachi Inari Rizzo, curator of prints and drawings at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. Every other month, I will be presenting an in-depth discussion of a topic related to the museum's collection of works on paper. These will coincide with exhibitions in the Print and Drawing Study Center that highlight themes found across the Fort Wayne Museum of Art's collection. The current exhibition in the Print and Drawing Study Center is called Expressionism and Spirituality. While much is spoken about the development of non-objective art and the move away from representation in the 20th century, many artists continue to explore traditional subjects in new contexts, in this case, religious themes. Georges Rouault, Max Beckmann, Laterio Calapai, and Art Sislo used an expressionistic style to add dramatic power to religious themes in their work. In 2023, the museum received a large donation of prints by Laterio Calapai, including the print series pictured here entitled The 7 Last Words of Christ. I was struck by the emotional power of his style, and it reminded me of the work of other artists in the collection. For this exhibition, I chose works that I felt used an expressionist style. I'm using the term loosely to signify artists who prioritize the evocative use of line, color, form, and space to communicate inner feelings and personal experiences over imitative representation. The artists often relish distortion, exaggeration, and subjective description. An artist who falls into this category is early 20th century German expressionist printmaker Erich Heckel on the left, who used sharp angular lines and stark contrasts of light and dark in his portrait. Norwegian artist Edvard Munch on the right communicates an air of anxiety through the young girl's shocked expression and the trembling, vibrating lines used to define her. The artists I selected in the exhibition were also drawn to the emotive potential of religious narratives, which allowed them to make parallels with contemporary themes concerning the human condition. The first works we will look at are by early 20th century French painter and printmaker Georges Rouault. In 1903, he was among the founding members and exhibitors of the Salon d'Automne exhibition, distinct with its open admission policy for those practicing in all the arts. Jurors were not members of the French Academy. Probably the most notorious Salon d'Automne exhibition was in 1905. Rouault exhibited with the Fauves and Independents, including Henri Matisse and André Durand. They used an untraditional painting style with bold, subjective color, understrained brushwork, simplified forms, and flat space. Critic Louis Vaucel coined the term fauve, or wild beasts, remarking Donatello is among wild beasts. This was a reference to the Italian Renaissance-style sculpture that shared the room. I believe Rouault is in the photographs, standing to the far right with his elbow out, behind a seated man. They are all encircling what may be the sculpture mentioned. The press clipping on the left shows Matisse's famous Woman with a Hat, now in the collection of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Rouault's subject at the time included clowns, prostitutes, and acrobats, but using darker colors than his contemporaries. An example of his work is in the upper right corner of the clipping. Ambroise Vollard, seen here, was probably one of the most influential art dealers in France during this time period. He organized Paul Cézanne's first exhibition and handled the work of Paul Gauguin, Pablo Picasso, Henri Matisse, and many others. In 1917, Vollard gave Rouault a studio space, recognizing his talent. It was common for Vollard to buy the contents of an artist's studio to sell. In 1913, Vollard bought all of Rouault's work up until that point, totaling 770 works, providing the artist financial security. This is Christ and Mammon, plate 14 from The Passion, which comprised 17 color etchings and 82 wood engravings. The Passion was published in 1939 by Vollard, with text by French poet André Suarez. This was an intensive printmaking period for Rouault over painting. What's so distinctive about Rouault's approach to his subject is his use of heavy dark outlines and glowing colors. At age 14, he apprenticed with a glass painter and later a medieval stained glass restorer, which lasted for about 5 years. Restoration included works on windows from Chartres Cathedral. Rouault's great-grandson described the artist's lunchtime as paradise hour, which was spent studying stained glass windows. This experience has long been credited as the inspiration for Rouault's use of dark contours around luminous color passages that are reminiscent of the lead encircling colored glass panes in the windows of a Gothic cathedral. When Rouault was 18, he studied at the École des Beaux-Arts with Gustave Moreau, who became a lifelong mentor. Moreau encouraged introspection and for Rouault to consider philosophy and religion to create art that reflected the spiritual realm rather than just the visible. Rouault was a devout Catholic, and his faith was an inspiration in his art. Despite the artist's popularity largely through the efforts of Volard's promotion, the Catholic Church did not immediately find spiritual value in his work. However, he received a commission for stained glass windows at Notre Dame de Toute Grâce in Plateau d'Assy in Haute-Savoie, France. You can faintly see these in the interior shot on the right. In 1916, Rouault agreed to illustrate Volard's reincarnations of Father Ubu in exchange for the dealer's help in publishing Miserere. The artist's father had died in 1912, which may have given rise to the idea, and was further developed through observing the horrendous events of World War I. The initial plan was extremely ambitious. He intended to create 100 etchings, accompanied by texts written by André Suarez. The first half was entitled Miserere, taken from Psalm 51, reading, "Have mercy on me, Lord." The second half was Guerre, French for war. This did not come to fruition, and instead Rouault released 58 etchings. Miserere focuses on the suffering of the world through misery, pride, vice, and death, and yet Rouault conveyed empathy for humanity and presents hope of redemption through the mercy of God with patience, love, and tenderness. The series of prints are a mixture of biblical stories and contemporary figures around him, largely the poor and marginalized populations. From 1914 to 1918, Rouault created India ink drawings for Miserere. He developed the drawings into paintings upon Volard's request. Vollard recognized Rouault's power in oils, which could be then translated to copper plates to prepare for the printed edition. Vollard used photogravure, a process of photomechanically etching onto copper. His intent was for Rouault to review these faithful reproductions on the plates and only make minor changes, saving time and money. However, this did not happen. Rouault worked during World War I and from 1922 to 27, making alterations to each plate. After Vollard's death, Rouault had to sue the dealer's heirs for his plates, which were finally printed and published in 1948. In his preface, the artist wrote, "Never satisfied, I resumed each subject endlessly, sometimes in as many as 12 or 15 successive states. I would have liked them all to be of the same quality." Beneath the Forgotten Cross looks deceptively simple at first, being in black and white, but Rouault added aquatint, dry point, and engraving, yielding a rich range of tonalities. You might be able to see what looks like fluid brushstrokes or watercolor passages. He achieved this through sugar lift, which is a solution of sugar, water, and ink or gouache applied to the plate with a brush or pen and then covered with a protective varnish. When the plate is rinsed with warm water, the sugar dissolves and lifts off the plate. The aquatint ground can be laid on before or after. Those flowing lines form areas of exposed, unprotected copper ready to be etched in an acid bath. Max Beckmann was a German painter, sculptor, and printmaker who fled to the Netherlands in 1937 with the rise of Nazi Germany. He emigrated to the United States in 1947. Max Beckmann's early paintings, exemplified by the resurrection on the right, look to the old masters for epic struggles, tragedy, and monumental themes that he painted in large scale in a heroic manner. In the resurrection, figures ascend towards heaven. It is colorful and the figures are robust and full of vitality. Seeing World War I as an opportunity to record this moment in history, he volunteered as an ambulance driver and medical orderly for the German army until the spring of 1915. Initially, he seemed to feel that war could provide him with first-hand material for great history painting, a stage for pictorial reportage. The brutality, death, and inhumanity of war was sobering, and in 1915 he suffered a breakdown due to physical and mental exhaustion. His works during and after serving in the war reflect how deeply his beliefs had been shaken. In drawings from 1914, he depicted operating rooms, the morgue, and other aspects of warfare. His lines tremble and the figures are frightened and exhausted. Despite this, the artist wrote, "My will to live is at present stronger than ever, although I have experienced great horror and have seemed to die with the others several times. But the more often one dies, the more intensely one lives. I've drawn. This is what keeps me from death and danger." Although he used biblical subjects prior to the war, his post-war work takes on a more somber tone. Beckmann said his previous style was not able to penetrate into the souls of things. His experiences helped shape and change the style of his work. Beckmann explored descent from the cross subject in both a painting from 1917 and a dry point from 1918. If we compare this 1917 painting with an earlier work, we notice that his palette has become pale, muted, and cold, drained of life. Lines and shapes have grown sharp and angular. The figures are no longer robust and heroic. Space is claustrophobic as his figures are crowded to the point of having little room to move. They are brought up close to the picture plane against an empty backdrop, creating great tension. Beckmann's dry point of Descent from the Cross was included in a portfolio entitled Faces, published in 1918. That year he wrote that he wanted to grasp the unutterable things of this world, to capture the terrible, thrilling monster of life's vitality, and to confine it with crystal clear, razor-sharp lines and planes. He also commented, "It is the dream of many to see only the white and truly beautiful, or the black, ugly and destructive, but I cannot help realizing both, for only in the two, only in black and white, can I see God as a unity, creating again and again a great and eternally changing terrestrial drama." Beckmann's use of religious subjects reveals the impact of war and his personal suffering. Stylistically, it shows the influence of Gothic and Renaissance art. After getting discharged, Beckmann didn't return home to his wife and son, but sought refuge with friends in the old medieval city of Frankfurt. During this period, he visited the Leipzig house, where he and a patron friend viewed a 15th century Pietà. His friend suggested that he create a modern image with the same degree of potency. Descent from the Cross was one of the results. Beckmann's writings express his great admiration for Matthias Grunewald. As early as 1903, he had visited Colmar and viewed Grunewald's Isenheim altarpiece seen on the right. In comparison, Beckmann and Grunewald share a focus on the suffering of Christ. The bodies in both paintings are emaciated and stiff as rigor mortis has already set in. In Beckmann's depiction, Christ's body echoes the shape of the cross and spans the entire print. He has sunken facial features and bears stigmata scars on his hands and feet, a reminder of his torture and brutality, and perhaps questioning salvation. One writer stated it captures the physical and spiritual descent. In subsequent works, Beckmann extracted religious elements and set them in contemporary scenes. In trying to better understand his world, he turned to Buddhism, the mysticism in the Kabbalah and Gnosticism, and the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer. Laterio Callipyj was known as a printmaker and started the graphic arts department at the Albright Art School, now University of Buffalo. He explored religious narratives off and on throughout his life. The Seven Last Words of Christ is an epic series. The scenes are largely devoid of context or background. Instead, the artist focused on the face. Here is the entire series. They range from being very readable as a face to completely abstract. This is Callipyj's illustration of Matthew 27:46. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" In the series, Callipyj primarily uses black lines and some touches of color applied through stencils. In this example, yellow forms a glint of sunlight reflected in his eye. An abstract drawing of a dove flies away. Like Rouault and Beckmann, Callipyge focuses on suffering. Both Beckmann and Callipyge show no landscape and one that is barren. A large sun has darkened. Both artists make the viewer uncomfortable through the feeling of confinement, but in different ways. In Callipyge's print on the left, he draws us near in an extreme close-up. The artist only presents us with a portion of Jesus' profile, just his eye and nose. The lines describing his features have become far more abstract and swirl with energy, perhaps appropriately, as this is the final print in the series, Father, into thy hands. Art Sislow's work has been a familiar sight throughout Fort Wayne. Although he worked at International Harvester in Navistar for 32 years, Sislow taught at University of St. Francis from 2002 to 2013 and has been a regular exhibitor at ArtLink and other Fort Wayne venues. Sislow used an expressionist style in A Holy Woman. Ever since his school days, Sislow has been drawn to heads and hands, probably for their emotional potential. There is a sense of immediacy as the artist gouged and cut into the wood, creating a decorative pattern framing her face and demonstrating the artist's love of line and texture. Sislow juxtaposed these stark shadows with soft painterly modeling through monotype. Sislow's monotype of Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect who presided over the trial of Jesus and his crucifixion, is an austere interplay of darks and lights. Sislow cast half of Pilate's face deep in shadow, as we can barely discern his face. Even on the side in light, darkness falls behind him. This dramatic contrast of light and shadow seems to be a metaphor for the internal conflict facing the subject. Sislow explained, "That is the power of an expressionist style, I think. It is charged with symbolism and meaning, not only through its content, but also through the way it is presented." In Bartimaeus, Sislow reduced the scene to its most salient details. The blind beggar in the foreground beckons to Jesus with his extended arm bathed in light. It is an excellent example of Sislow's use of the dark field manner in monotype. For monotype, the artist begins with a smooth, non-porous surface such as glass, as its matrix or base. The artist creates an image out of ink or paint on the matrix, which is then transferred to paper to create a unique impression. Monotypes can be printed using a press or by hand. There are two different approaches to the technique. The dark field manner is a subtractive process. Ink is applied to the entire matrix first. The image emerges through wiping away the ink and then adding to areas. The light field manner is an additive process in which the image is drawn directly onto a clean surface. In this example, Sislow rolled on the ink at varying thicknesses and then used different methods to manipulate the ink: a sharpened bamboo pen for thin lines, a brush with a solvent to thin the ink, and his finger. Sislow imprinted his fingertip ridges in the background and in shadows, like the hatch marks on Bartimaeus' face and arm. Sislow enjoys borrowing formal elements and compositions from art history. By working within the tradition of religious painting, he adds further meaning to his works through these associations. Head of Christ icon is reminiscent of Byzantine paintings of Christ in the wide spacing of the eyes, prominent eyebrows, and flat features, which can be seen in the 14th century icon on the right. In Sislow's monotype, Christ is not surrounded by gold leaf, but under closer inspection, a series of lines emanate out like a halo. The Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon, is a poem from the Old Testament. Sislow created numerous prints inspired by the celebration of love. In his frontispiece, the artist contrasted the bold forms and woodcut, spelling out the title with lyrical passages in sumi ink for the angelic figures. His prints include deer, gazelles, horses, fruit, trees, and flowers that are all mentioned in the poem. In the Song of Songs through the lattice on the right, Sislow depicted a woman, the beloved, in the foreground, and the man seen peeking through the lattice work. The artist rubbed Conte crayon on sandpaper, making a powdery pigment that he brushed on the print while still damp to achieve subtle modeling of the woman's face. Sislo is aware of a variety of allegorical readings of the poem and enjoys how his depiction can be enjoyed on many levels. Sislo wrote, "I think that's what makes art so exciting, the open-ended possibilities of interpretation and the conscious or unconscious decisions that the fabricator makes." The woman is veiled and clothed in dark blue, a color traditionally worn by the Virgin Mary to symbolize her royalty and humility, as seen in Byzantine paintings of the Madonna and Child. It brought to my mind Saint Bernard of Clairvaux's interpretation of the Beloved in the Song of Songs as the Virgin Mary, who personified the Church, popularized in the 12th century. Prominent in the print are the Beloved's elegant attenuated fingers. This reminded me of medieval and Renaissance paintings in which the Virgin Mary's hand gestures held various meanings. In the Annunciation, they often express surprise and modesty. Sislo says that the spiritual is always on his mind. In Self-Portrait in Yellow, Sislo takes time to reflect on life, death, and perhaps redemption. The imagery printed in black roughly forms a cross. To me, it also faintly is reminiscent of an altarpiece, which sits behind the altar in a Christian church. The altarpiece often includes narratives painted or sculpted in a central panel and hinged side panels or wings. In Sislo's Self-Portrait, his face discloses the complexity of human nature, with simultaneous views of front and profile. A skeletal figure, a reminder of the transience of life, is in the lower portion of the altarpiece format, which is called a predella. In contrast, the scenes in the corners in sepia ink are autobiographical and focus on daily life. The side panels depict Adam and Eve, perhaps a reference to humanity's biblical ancestors. Sislo stated, "The Adam and Eve figures seem to pop up in my themes at various times. When I was a child, my father had art books that I used to go through over and over. Two very early memories are etched in my mind from that activity, seeing Botticelli's Birth of Venus and Jan van Eyck's Adam and Eve panels in the Ghent altarpiece." Thank you for joining me today, and please stop into the Print and Drawing Study Center to see these works in person. I will be back here on Thursday, May 8th, corresponding with our second Thursday programming. I will have on view the exhibition Surrealism into Abstract Expressionism in the Print and Drawing Study Center. We will look at the role of surrealism in the development of abstract expressionism, featuring works by Dorothy Daner, Herbert Ferber, seen here, Adolf Gottlieb, David Smith, and many others.